I'm Jimmy DeMetro. I'd like to introduce my co-host, Professor Tom Papademetriou, and together we welcome our distinguished guests, Tania Raymonde, Jan Uddin, our patriotaki Costas Mandylor, and the director of Cliffs of Freedom, Van Ling. Thank you very much for joining us. We're happy to see you, and we're looking forward to this opportunity to talk a little bit about the film. Van, I'd like to start with you as the director of the film. Can you tell us how you became interested in doing a film about the Greek Revolution? How did that happen?
Well, it's a very interesting story. A Greek-American woman named Marianne Metropoulos had come up with this story idea about a Greek village girl who falls for a Turkish officer on the eve of the Greek War of Independence. And she had been trying for years to somehow bring that story out to the masses. And she hooked up with my partner, my producing partner, Casey Cannon, who's a producer in the business. And she asked me to take a look at the script and maybe help them work out some of the story ideas and things. And so that's how I got interested in the project. And I didn't know anything really about certainly modern Greek history. Most of us in America learn about ancient Greece, but we really aren't taught about modern Greek history and because back in the late 1700s, early 1800s, everything's about the fact that the United States just became independent and was creating a democratic country. And so I love research. So I started diving into books and histories and articles and everything. And I was fascinated by, not only the history of modern Greece, but also the fact that the parallels of countries fighting for democracy. One of the most fascinating things to me was the idea of Philhellenism, which is where different countries around the world who have recently become democratized, they've overthrown monarchies and things, were thrilled with the concept of democracy and republics and wanted to kind of look back and say, where did democracy come from? Oh, it came from the Greeks. Well, then we love all things Greek. And that also played a part. That what was called Philhellenism, the love of Greeks, love of all things Greek, played a part in helping the Greeks themselves regain their independence, which I thought was a really fascinating story idea. Now, that's kind of tangential to what we were doing in the film, because the primary idea of the film was to create a commercial Hollywood kind of love story, historical drama. So after doing all this research and talking with consultants and everything else, it was a really fascinating project to be able to work on, and that's kind of how I got interested in it. And I kind of backdoor ended up directing it because I had worked on the script. I had done a page 1 rewrite of the original script and story, and worked very closely with Casey and with Marianne to bring the story elements that she wanted to kind of get across. And for that reason, and because she saw me direct some smaller things prior to the making of the film, she felt that I knew her story and this project best. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I got the opportunity to direct her, and I'll always be grateful for that opportunity. I
know that Marianne Metropoulos was devoted to this project for a number of years. She was very, very anxious to get it done. I think it's based on a novel, is it not? She did a novel, a fictional.
She wrote a novella.
Of Destiny, I think, is called Daughter of Destiny.
Marianne Metropoulos had written an unpublished novella about this basic concept, and she wanted to figure out how to, get it into a form that more people could enjoy than just like a self-published book or anything.
Well, it also became a kind of issue of ethnic pride for her, I think. I've heard her say that this is, as a proud Greek American, this is a story she had to tell. And curiously, as you mentioned yourself, this is not an issue that's been explored in cinema, certainly not even by the Greeks. There are some films on the Greek Revolution, but nothing to match the scale of Cliffs of Freedom. And I think one of the reasons they haven't done more films are budgetary reasons. They just don't allow a big production to be made in Greece. So it's right. Interesting that it fell into your hands.
Well, one of the interesting challenges we had was we wanted to make a film not exactly for a Greek audience, but a Greek American audience, and more importantly, a broader non-Greek audience. So one of the reasons I think that I was selected to direct this is because I've worked on a lot of commercial films that are about bringing a new experience to people who don't necessarily know that history or that those feelings. And part of my job in making a commercial Hollywood epic, to some extent, and something that reflected the drama and emotion of the culture of Greece was something that was really a mandate for us, and to figure out how to bring it and make it understandable and relatable to non-Greek audiences, because that's really what it comes down to. Even if you make a really great piece that is very, very localized to a particular culture, you have to find a way to touch the common humanity of anybody who can watch it and can relate to the idea of love across the tracks or those kind of things, and the idea of fighting for freedom against oppression. All of those things are so, even more so because, are so relevant to our lives today, with the amount of division and the amount of emotional drama and political drama that goes on. We found it really important to try to tell a kind of a unifying story rather than a divisional story.
Well, you've made a mainstream film, and it's got to be accessible both to the Greek audience in particular, and of course the broader audience, the international audience that will see the film. I think Tom.
Yeah, I actually, as an Ottoman historian, one of the great things about this, first of all, I love anytime there's a film about this time period, either about the Ottoman Empire or modern Greece. So I'm very excited. Some of the things that seem to be raised by that, and there are a number of big issues. One, very clearly, the role of women, not just in Ottoman society. So you see the harem, but you see the Greek women in a kind of cloistered world, protected world, issues of how elites function. And so I guess in your research, I suppose you've went through, thought about a lot of those elements because they seem to be very clear in that. For Tania, I actually have a question, because the issue of one of the opening scene, of course, is women, and the title of the film, the cliffs, right? Falling off a cliff and throwing yourself off a cliff. And it's based on, of course, there's an earlier episode in 1803 in Epirus, where the women are trying to flee Ali Pasha, who's kind of in charge of that area, and they dance. And the legend, of course, they throw themselves off the cliff. So I wanted to ask you, in a sense, here we have this historical account of women kind of doing this incredible sacrifice to escape all sorts of terrible things. They're a terrible fate. And so I wanted to see what your thoughts were about the character, what her choices were as a woman in that world. And even at the end where you had to, that's the final choice, how does that present itself to you? And what did you think about that as far as kind of how it related maybe historically, but also to you as a person?
Well, I think similarly to Van, I didn't know too much when I at first read the script. And in fact, that was kind of one of the most kind of alluring parts of this to me, was just that, not that I'm a historian by any means for any part of the world, but there wasn't much that I knew about what the country went through and what Greek independence was really like. and certainly not what women were involved, and what if whether or not Christina was like an amalgamation of these famous freedom fighters, and were there actually women fighting at that time, because this was so long ago. As women now, I mean, we struggle enough as it is even today. Yesterday was International Women's Day.
Right.
And I was thinking about it because I knew we would have this interview today, and I wondered, gosh, I mean, it's like where it's happened so long ago, and yet we're kind of so retrograde almost in our thinking that even in a patriarchal society like the one that she lived in at that time, if you think that because she is kind of based on a couple different women that Van was inspired by, and Marianne for the story that actually existed at that time. I mean, what an insane sense of rebellion for a woman, like from that period. So for me, I just I found it like a great challenge and very fun to try and think, gosh, okay, let's see. I can't even figure out how to exist without an internet signal. So I am a woman at this, if I lived in this period, and this is my life, this is how I've grown up until this point. Would I have enough like bravery and moxie to want to sacrifice like my own safety in life for my country and fight for it like a rebel fighter? Could I do that? I was so excited by her courage. And in that sense, I guess you could rationalize anything. It's pretty badass that your aunt jumped off a cliff rather than bend to the invading army. So I think, she's definitely upholding a crazy tradition. I thought I was so in love with her. Very, I admired Christina. So yeah, I felt like it was kind of an honor to try and
right.
portray this kind of woman,
There are a couple, you mentioned there are a couple historical figures, right? And so the ones that are very well known they're actually Blascarina Bubulina. I don't know if you have come across her name, and Mado Mavroyianus. So the stories are kind of very, Constantina Zacharia, who's from the Peloponnese and that type of thing. But I think that issue of, as limited choices, I think that's kind of one of the things that came across. But also in the background are the harem girls, right? So that's kind of always playing to that. So that's all kind of interesting. I auditioned
for a harem girl. So did Costas. I think that's how. Isn't that right?
Yes, I did.
Costas got
I didn't get it.
though.
I didn't get it. I'm very upset with Van Ling, but you know what? I ended up in the movie.
I'm sure that hurt you terribly.
There are some things, even if they're historically accurate, that just nobody wants to see. You know what I mean, Costas?
Yes, my darling.
That's one of the challenges was to try to, whenever you're doing a period piece, especially in today's culture, it's always challenging to try to be historically accurate, because historical accuracy in certain periods about certain topics, like the treatment of women, can come off horrific when seen through today's lens. So you want to try to figure out how to be true to some of it, but also to be true to the fact that no institution is monolithic. No stereotype is accurate, because it usually is predicated on the idea of ideas being monolithic. And I believe that there were, strong women. They didn't have hard power, but they had soft power. And, look at Yaya as a character. I mean, we talk about how women were property and in a patriarchal society, and how they weren't respected as equals. And all of that may be true, but they also found their own ways to find power. And I think that's true for the harems as well. The Ottoman Empire wasn't monolithic either. And one of the things we were trying to show was that there were Turks who believed in equality and who believed in the respect for other cultures. And that's one of the things that I was really happy to have tried to do with Jan's character.
Right. Yeah.
I will say though, for me personally, if I'm truly honest, beyond just like the interest of the from a historical point of view, what I was most drawn to was the love story. And just hearing you talk about it and seeing Jan, that was what kept me wanting to know what happened next. And in a sense, that's the most universal thing of all. So if I'm really being truthful, I think Christina's relationship with Jan's character was the two of them. That's what kind of guided me. I think that ultimately I made the emotional decision. It wasn't an intellectual one or even one out of curiosity. I just I wanted the two of them to be together. That's what
It's
that's
got
what
to
really
be, though, a rather impossible romance. I mean,
Of course.
obviously. And
Of
I
course.
like
but how
the
alluring
Jan,
is that?
because I think that, Jan, how did you prepare for this role? You're playing against stereotype. You're hated by the masses, and yet you're there's a very different person behind that facade. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about how you saw the role and what attracted you to it?
Yeah, it sort of was quite easy in a way, because there was a lot about my background, even until recently at that point, that really suited itself very well for Tariq, because I was raised by Muslim, half Muslim and parents and half Christian family as well. So I always had both sort of, my worldview was sort of informed by both religions and both civilizations. And I also spent a lot of my life studying theology and history and philosophy, which I still do. And that draws on what Van and Tania was saying, that, I knew a lot about, Greek philosophy and Greek history, but not about that period. And also my mother had recently died when we were about to shoot that movie. So there was kind of like a conglomeration of quite a lot of things. There was like the kind of heaviness of my mother just dying, but feeling a kind of a peace about it as well. And there was this kind of sensitivity towards how I felt like I'd let her down in some ways, because, she was Muslim where I'm Christian, and there were things like that. And so I had this kind of sort of sensitivity of wanting to kind of feel for, I don't know, two different sides of my life and where I come from. And so even, just these little notes were things I could draw on very easily with Tariq, the sensitivity aspect, and caring for both sides and wanting fairness. And that kind of, I remember how I felt. A lot to do was losing my mother at the time, even though Tariq doesn't lose his mother as such. There was that kind of weightiness. So I found that life sort of prepared me at that moment for it. I didn't have to think too much. I just kind of automatically was in that place.
Your mentor, right, is a Greek. And
Yes.
in the context of, let's say, Constantinople or Istanbul, that would have been very clear. But that, the fact of Christopher Plummer as, this great actor, how was that relationship? And was it kind of a mentor relationship off screen as well as on screen? It seemed very sincere and lovely.
Yeah, with Christopher Plummer, it was very natural, because I'm quite a quiet person most of the time. I'm eccentric as well, and I can laugh, but he was very gentle, very calm, very quiet, and in between takes he would sit quietly. And I felt like, because I was sort of like that myself, that we could sit next to each other without feeling like we were imposing on one another, and then we'd get into like gentle conversation that felt very real and very genuine. It just always felt very natural between us, and so that's what we took on screen with us as well. I got the feeling that we liked each other a lot.
We do tend to think about a set narrative of opposition, but what that does is it offers ambiguity.
One of the reasons why Thanasi was such an important character for us, Christopher Plummer's character, was that he represented the fact that the Ottomans kind of knew what their strengths were. And if my understanding of Ottoman history is correct, they weren't really great at negotiating and being diplomatic. And so they would actually bring in non-Turks to be those roles. And the backstory for Jan's character Tariq was that his father was like him. He was very open and understanding and wanted to make sure that if my son is going to become a leader, let's make him the best kind of leader, which means somebody who knows about the Greeks and the people who are the subjects of the Sublime Porte, the people who are going to be the governed, and give them respect. And so, you know, his father wanted to make sure that he had a Greek tutor in this area, so that, you know, it was a sign of respect and a sign of the desire to understand, as opposed to just the desire to subjugate.
Right. Well, just on that note, Mehmet, the great conqueror of Constantinople, he had a Greek tutor. He was learning Greek. I mean, it's part of a tradition. It goes back very far. So I have a question for Costa, in that you grew up in Australia. I read from your bio, and and your parents and your lineage comes from the Peloponnesos, from Morea. So
Yep.
did you grow up learning about the revolution, and what did you learn? And also, did it confirm or challenge any of your ideas that you had growing up, in that context?
I've sometimes sat at little panels with Tania, Jan, once or twice, and Van Ling, and every now and then I went a little bit like, 400 years of beheadings, rape, and slavery. And I don't know if Van ever got upset with me, or Tanya throws my buddy's being over the top, but this is what happened. And I learned my history through my grandfather, my grandmother, my uncles, and all this stuff. And I've got to tell you, there's so many wonderful stories that are tragic and beautiful because they triumphed and kept their history, the Greeks, right? These stories have to be told, because it's not just about the Greeks, it's about people standing up for themselves. And if you want to re-ask the question, I'll get back on track.
Well,
I haven't drank.
What you said was great, but in the end, I mean,
Let's get more
I'm
specific.
Greek American, and I grew up with a certain narrative.
Yeah.
I went to school to study, which challenged all those narratives. Here you have a film that you grew up with a certain narrative. Did this film confirm the way those stories of your grandparents, or did it challenge you in any way?
When I ended up getting lucky enough to be hired to do this job, I was never prouder to be in a movie. There was nothing that was not accurate. It was just squashing a couple of little things. And Tanya's character, and I found out through all my Greek friends, is kind of based on Bouboulina, which was a very heroic, powerful woman that kind of ran the Navy and the Army. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with that?
I'd like to add, though, and it's been said by I think all of you, is that these are universal stories, and I think that's what's really captivating, is that whether it's a love story or crossing kind of lines of ethnicity, religion, or class, or all those things, those are all human stories. And so I think that's, in my estimation, after watching this, that seems to be one of the elements that I think people can take away, that an audience that doesn't know anything about this will say, oh, okay, there's a struggle, there's class issues, there's ethnicity, religion, it's a very complicated world, and these people are trying to make their way.
As actors, we use so much of our imagination always to try and fill in the blanks of a story or a backstory or character. And we're constantly trying to figure out how to create somebody's persona. And a lot of that isn't on the page. And some stories are more captivating than others. But it's very rare that you get to kind of, first of all, act out something that actually happened, quote unquote, that's a part of history, anybody's history, that's verifiable and recorded. But also, I mean, I think for Costas too, what I noticed, just the pride and kind of that, oh my God, pinch me feeling. These are stories I've heard ever since I was a little kid. This is my culture. This is my history. I've grown up with these folklores, legends. I know all about this. I learned it in school. I'm a patriot. To act that, to be in a film about that. So I get it, Costas. I understand. Like, it's almost, it must have been a wild experience, because you're probably thinking back on all the stories you heard when you were a kid all the stories your grandparents told you, your parents told you.
Yeah.
And it's part of you. It's part of the genetic fiber of your being. You've heard all of these things. It's in you.
Yeah.
So to see that kind of reenacted, and that's, I think, where like the classic old Hollywood movie epic kind of comes out in this movie.
History, yeah.
And you're kind of, it's almost, it's hard to believe that you're participating in this today. It's only been a couple of years since we made it. So I completely understand. Yeah.
I think Costa, you are obviously quite proud of the film, and that I think is says everything there is to say about it. Your pride in this particular film tells us that it was a job well done, and that everyone involved did their best to honor the story, to honor the history, and to bring out a commercial product that did not violate historical contexts and just undermine somehow the part of the audience that shared this national history. You managed to make Greeks as well as non-Greeks come into this film and find something to see and to admire. I would like to ask all of you, if you will, what do you think the audience should take away from the film? Is there a message that you think the audience should take away from the film? I'd like to hear from you if you have an opinion on that. Costa, you look like you're
now let our leader say it first, because he's so eloquent.
Okay, Van, I guess. That's got to be you.
I think one of my entries to the whole culture and the history and this story is always, as a human being, as Costas would say, and to look at it from the individual standpoint, which is, it's harder for an entire group sometimes to find humanity when they're at a common purpose. But it's the individuals, like our pair who fall in love, our leads, who are the ones who make the boldest choices. And they can say, whoa, wait, let's not just assume that all Turks are horrible. Let's not assume that all Greeks are worth just subjugating, and try to find a common humanity within the characters. So my entry as a non-Greek was to try to find the things that are common to all cultures, love and respect and the ability and desire to do what's right.
Yeah, and the film certainly does that. You managed to do that very successfully.
Well, hopefully what we were able to do is to introduce the history of the culture, or a snapshot of the culture at that point in time, as the backdrop for a relatable, emotional relationship and love, not only of each other as individuals, but of love of family. The importance of family, and Yaya and Costas's character, the father, and also the love of your culture, your heritage, and try to figure out how to bring that together through all the conflicts that they go through, and how to react. And it was really important to me that we bookended the film with the idea of the choices you make, create your myth, create your legend, and how important those are. Those legends may be important to your family, they may be important to the people you love, or they also may be important to your heritage, and how all of that is tied together in the Greek culture. I think that we really tried to make sure that we encompassed multiple viewpoints, which is one of the biggest challenges. One thing I found out in making this film is that, as they say, if you put two Greeks in a room, you will get three opinions. and all of them are valid each person has their own truths, and that it doesn't mean one person's always wrong, one person's always right. When I was doing the research on this, I would find diametrically opposing conclusions from the same event. all the time. And even dealing with people talking about the film, Greeks like Costas and Simon Kassianides and Billy Zane and other folks who worked on it who were Greek, and of course Marianne Metropolis, and our consultants, they each had different viewpoints based on their own experiences of what being a Greek was like, or what being, Greek is, how a Greek would react to any given thing. So it was always a very interesting balancing game. And ultimately, our guide was, what is the emotional truth of these characters? Why do they feel the way they do? And how do they try to influence each other in ways that are for the better? And ultimately, that's kind of what democracy is about. I remember specifically on a test screening we did down in New Zealand where we were doing our post-production, there was a local Greek community in Wellington, New Zealand. And we showed them the film, and most of them loved it. And someone came up to me and said, "Oh, we're really happy with the film, but you know what? You did the crosses wrong when, and we worked really hard to make sure we got the crosses right, but you can't control every extra on the screen when you're doing this." It was funny. This person came up and said, "Oh, well, you're doing the crosses wrong." And another Greek who just watched the film, who didn't know them, came up and said, "Yeah, that's right. The Greek crossing wasn't right. It should be like this." And then the first Greek said, "No, it should be like this." And they started arguing about how Greeks should be crossing in this movie. And I commented to them about the two Greeks, three opinions thing, and they just both laughed and said, "That's democracy for you."
Yeah.
Which I found very telling and very characteristic. So it was a very interesting experience. And hopefully what people will take away is one common idea, which is that love can make a difference. And when you see people as individual human beings, as opposed to a race or some kind of grouping, especially a stereotype grouping, you have the ability to make important decisions that can change the world for the better.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's so true. And I want to thank all of you for participating. Again, congratulations on a job well done. You should all be proud of your work here. And I'm very, very pleased that you were able to share this time with us and with our viewers. And I thank you very, very much. And I look forward to more good work from each and every one of you. I'm sure there's a lot more good work to come. And before we close, I'd also want to thank Casey Cannon for helping make this possible. And of course, Art Demopoulos as well. I thank you. And as I said before, we look forward to seeing more good work from each and every one of you. And best of luck to all of you. And I think we can say,
Thank you.
As of this moment, you are all honorary Greeks. You are one of us. So, be well. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.